Welcome to season 12 of Parenting Aces Podcast, a proud member of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and today we are going to be talking off-court fitness for tennis players, junior tennis players, and collegiate tennis players, and those aspiring to play professionally. And my guest, once again, is Dean Hollingworth, who, those of you who have been watching or listening for a while, you are very familiar with Dean's name, and I will have a link to our prior podcast together in the show notes, because Dean has shared some incredible information over the years with the Parenting Aces community, and I'm super excited to have him back. We are nearing the end of our season, which is crazy, but we only have a couple episodes left, and I am looking forward to taking a little break and re-gearing for season 13 in 2024. If there are any particular guests or topics that you'd like to see on the podcast, please reach out. You can email me, lisa@parentingaces.com, or you can reach out to me via direct message on any of the social media channels. I'm on all of them, so I really look forward to hearing from you. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with fitness specialist Dean Hollingworth. Dean, it's been way too long, and I am so happy to get you back and so happy to see your smiling face. Are you home in Canada?
Yes, I am home in Canada right now. Thank you, Lisa, for having me on. And you're 100% right. It's been way too long, and I'm really happy to be here with you tonight.
Well, we've got a lot to chat about. So we're recording this, it's mid-October-ish. It's probably not going to air for a few weeks, but I want to just kind of jump right into what's going on in pro tennis, just from what I'm seeing on social media, with players being injured and pulling out of events at the end of the year. And this whole thing that's happening with so much competition and players not having those kind of training blocks to take time away from the competition court to really work on their fitness levels, and all those things. And I know we're jumping right in here, and for my listeners, I want to just tell you, in the show notes, there are going to be links to prior podcasts with Dean, and I encourage you to go back and watch or listen to those, to give you a little more background on who he is and what his credentials are. But you have to just trust me that he's the guy when it comes to off-court fitness training. So, yeah, what's going on?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And you're absolutely right. You know, it's not only at the pro level, though. We're seeing at all levels of tennis, whether it's at the college level or at the junior level. At the pro level right now, what I feel is happening is that as the season, because it is almost a 12-month season, let's be honest. Okay. Yeah. They get November off, and then they start ramping up mid-December, getting ready, you know, if they're heading off to Australia, a couple of tournaments before, adjusted a time. But they're trying to get in as much as possible at the end, and packing too much volume into such a small amount of time. To expect an athlete of any level, especially like a junior level, but even the professional, these are high quality athletes that we're talking about, that train specific for their sport and the rigors of the sport. It's a very difficult sport on the body, especially if we're playing on hard court.
Yeah.
Tournament after tournament, if you continuously make it to a reasonable level, if you're making it deep into tournaments, quarters, semis, that's a lot of mileage on the legs, and the body cannot cannot keep up with that. You know, it's not just about the physicality, it's the mental aspect of it too. It's the traveling. It's not like you're staying in one spot, first of all, for 8 weeks and just playing tennis. No, you know, you have to pack up, you have to travel. There's time change. Number one, the exhaustion, fighting for points, the psychological stress. We always talk about the physical stress, which is there. especially if you're going, to these places where it's really hot. I'm working with an ATP player right now. He went down to the Carolinas and he wasn't used to it. Like he was battered just by the weather itself.
Yeah.
And I think if the athletes could plan out a more realistic schedule, I think it would be extremely beneficial. Now, it's easy to say because, listen, unless you're I forget what it is, but if you're not in the top 50, if not even the top 40, it's such a difficult way to make a living. I mean, we have to keep in mind, like I said, travel, room and board, most of them have coaches with them. And, you're not making these big, huge sums of money that we see that are happening at the slams. I mean, these athletes, men and women, are really struggling financially. So they have to play. They want to play the tournaments in order to maintain this lifestyle, to play this sport that they love. So I think better management, if it's possible, of tournaments. And then also we have to combine a fitness training program within that in order to maintain a healthy body. So you go on the road for 6 weeks, let's say, or 6 to 8 weeks. You have to maintain, somehow the athlete has to find a way of getting that training in order to avoid, these typical injuries that we're seeing, shoulder problems, if it's obliques or knees or lower back even. Maintaining a good fitness program with all the essentials around it. And listen, having a good team around you also is imperative. I know,
Sure.
I mean, the ATP player that I'm working with, we talk every day. I mean, or pretty close to every day is, okay, what's going on? And I just don't send him a program. I mean, this program's based on, okay, how many days? First we say, okay, how many days are you outside of the tournaments? Okay, we got 3 days. How are you feeling? Hey, listen, if you're telling me you're exhausted, I don't want to make you more tired. And I just think it's really being smart, and the athletes being honest with themselves, saying, you know what, I'm going to take the next tournament off. I'm going to recover a little and be healthier going into a tournament. And with that, being more competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you take that down to the junior level, where you're dealing with bodies that are still growing and developing, hormones that are going nuts. And, let's face it, not every family can afford to have a coach travel with their child, and a fitness expert and a nutrition expert. And, there are a lot of variables that come in, but what we don't want to see is kids developing these injuries over and over and over again that are keeping them away from the game that presumably they love and that brings them joy, because their bodies are giving out on that.
I think on a certain level, it's even worse at the junior level, because the kids are playing. I know this summer I was pulling my hair out. I mean, literally, I was just like, you can't be playing again. You've played 4 tournaments in a week and you're 13 years old.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're a little short-sighted sometimes. Like, oh, we got to get the points. We want to move up into rankings. Yeah, it's great. But what about development? Like, we're talking about injury prevention, but what about developing the athlete too for the future and seeing, okay, you're 13. Where do you want to be 14, 15? Not where you want to be in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But, the tournament schedule doesn't help either, because they're playing. There's this tournament. If you're 13, you're playing 14 and under, and then maybe you'll play 16 and under, and then come on, guys, like, if you're 13 and you're playing 18 and under, I really have to question that. And then we start talking about injuries, right? Well, we're talking about injuries due to excessive playing. We're talking to injuries for young adults, as you said, that are still developing. They're putting a massive stress on their body. And now they're going to play, in some cases, somebody that isn't an adult by definition, but body-wise is pretty close. And now the ball's coming faster and they're behind the ball, and they're not making proper contact, and the arm's getting jolted. these are the things that just keep lending into our injury problem. The volume, first of all, volume, the amount of hours that you're playing in a week. It's not just tournaments and then out of the tournament. Doesn't mean you try and chase. I love when I see the junior athletes trying to take on even more lessons the week before the tournament. Listen, the week before the tournament, you are who you are. Okay. We're trying to clean things up and get you prepared. It's not time to increase volume. A lot of parents have that wrong. Oh, big tournament, we got to get more. If anything, you want to taper. You want to start having the body feel refreshed. You want to have that super compensation. So when they step on court, there is no fatigue from the week after. There is this feeling of readiness. There's this feeling of freshness of, oh, I can't wait to play. And I feel like I can play to the top of my level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a good point, Dean, that the week before competition is you want the child to peak during the tournament, yes, not 2 days before the tournament.
And we're laughing, but it's something that we see. So, yeah, just as a guideline, if you're starting a tournament on a Saturday, let's say, Monday, you can come in, you can have a decent day. Tuesday, you can have a decent day. But then, when you want to have a couple of matches in there, you don't have to be practicing twice a day. You don't have to be doing over, 2 or 3 hours. And if I say 3 hours, I'm throwing in an hour of fitness in there too. And the fitness has to be smart also. I'm not burning a young or any athlete for that matter out on a Wednesday when I know they're going to start play on a Saturday. It's, I just had a young man doing ITFs. He was with me today. He's 17. And we had a big workout today because why? His tournament's starting on Monday. I'm seeing him again on Friday. I told him, I said, listen, Chris, we're going to focus on a lot of movement, reaction. You're going to get good rest time in between because I don't want you feeling exhausted after the training session. Contrary, I want him to feel revived. I want him to feel excited and wow. And that whole emotional component behind it, that I feel ready to compete and I'm ready to go. Not like I just got my ass whooped by my coach.
Yeah. And this kind of is a great segue into a discussion about off-court fitness training and who should be guiding our athletes and why you can't just walk into a 24-hour fitness and talk to the first personal trainer you see and hire them to work with your 15-year-old.
Yeah.
What is it that sets tennis-specific fitness training apart from more generic gym work?
That's a great question. I love that question, by the way. And if I don't answer it, because I'm going to go off on a tangent, so there's a little warning coming up here. Please re-ask. So we don't just see this though at the junior level. I've worked with I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of athletes that had, that had the opportunity and have gone to university and play university tennis. Now we think, oh, university tennis, big schools, they must have their programs great. I can't tell you how many times I've been told it's the assistant strength and conditioning coach for the football team doing our conditioning, and we're training like football players.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's happening everywhere. I find at the club level, especially with sports study programs, what happens often, and I'm very fortunate that I'm at a club that they understand the importance of fitness, that they hire a young trainer coming, a year or two out of exercise science, kinesiology, and paying the minimum. Cutting a corner. Yes, we have somebody that graduated from this great program, but doesn't have the experience, of working with young people, working with young athletes, and more specifically, tennis players. So you asked the question, and I'm very proud of myself. I didn't forget. I've said this on numerous occasions, and I'm going to say it again. Tennis is the most difficult sport to train for. So people might be saying, well, how do you know? Well, prior to, I've been in tennis specifically 100% for 12 to 15 years now. Prior to that, I worked with athletes. I always make the joke. The only athlete I've never trained is a curler, which is weird since I am in Canada, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I made the switch to tennis, I took it upon myself, to learn as much as I can about specific type of, we'll call it quote unquote, tennis specific training, learn the specific movements of the sports, talk with coaches to see, what are the swing patterns? Where are the stress put on? What are we trying to build? And then became really a student of the game from the standpoint, listen, I'm horrible at tennis. Let's just get that out there. So don't even, if you ever watch me playing tennis, don't laugh. But on a note is, I watched so much practice. I talked with so many coaches. I had the great fortune of traveling with some of the best coaches in the world. And I spent every minute I could on court examining the game and putting together and just being sensible and reasonable. Because I think sometimes people get caught up in all this social media and Instagram and cool stuff. If you looked at my training programs, they're not that exciting. But I'll tell you what, they do strengthen the body the way it needs it for tennis. It does help protect, because nothing is for sure. You can't stop injuries, but it does, in my opinion, help the athletes, protect the athletes as much as they can for the rigors of the sport, and also prepares them cardiovascularly for tennis itself. And I think those three, Lisa, proper training, the injury prevention, if you will, and the cardiovascular aspect of it are so important. Because if you're missing one of those, then that's where we start to see, perhaps some things happening that we don't want to.
And so what are some tennis specific types of exercises that our players should be doing that you're seeing kind of a gap in the knowledge there, a gap in the practice there?
That great question. So first of all, to say that an exercise is tennis specific is a little bit misleading, from the standpoint that if I throw a medicine ball with a player, doesn't mean it's tennis specific, because I might do the same thing with a hockey player or a different type of positioning with a pitcher, let's say. A squat, everybody should squat, so it's not tennis specific. So having said that, because I just want to make it clear, but there are certain things that people, first of all, I think the warm-up for me has changed drastically. Like if you examine the warm-up I'm doing today compared to even 3 or 4 years ago, it is completely different. I was lucky enough to do a presentation in Oslo, Norway 3 weeks ago. And I talked specifically about this. I said, you know what? I don't like the word warm-up anymore. Because what does warm-up say? It means I've broken a sweat. But I can stand in a sauna and break a sweat. Doesn't mean I'm ready and prepared to play a sport. So tennis is multi-dimensional. So the warm-up should also be multi-dimensional. So what does that mean? Well, it has to address mobility. Your players have to have the proper mobility. And if they don't have the proper mobility, that is definitely an area where we can start seeing some injuries to occur. Then they have to be properly prepared in the sense of movement. So what are you doing for movement? So one of the things I've often said is that your warm-up should be representative of the sport you're going to be doing. Meaning, if you're not performing crossovers, if you're not performing, shuffles, if you're not performing backward movements, sprints, that type of stuff, some type of medicine ball or even elastic work in order to get the core firing, to get the shoulders going, we're missing out. And parents and players and coaches have to understand that the warm-up is also a learning period. So when I see warm-ups that look like 2 laps around the court, I want to cry. Like, I just want to literally cry, because I'm thinking, okay, let's look at them run. We know it's going to be messy. And quite honestly, it is a waste of time. To take 2 laps around the court, you can be doing something much more beneficial for the body. Same thing for shuffling. If you're going to shuffle around a court, and we see that also, why would you? Like, think of it. What's the most amount of shuffles you'd ever want to do in a match? Perhaps 2, 3. I don't think so. So why would you shuffle around a court? Work on that change of direction. You asked one of the things, what are we not working on properly? Change of the direction and deceleration. If you don't, we talk about making athletes faster and stronger, which is great. But when they get to the ball, they do have to stop. So if we're not working on deceleration, I think that's a big, big one. We need to have strong lower bodies. We need to have strong upper bodies. Everyone talks about legs getting you there, but the upper body has to be equally strong in order to go through, whatever it is, 3-4 hours of forehands, backhands, and serves. It has to be able to stay in one place.
So you say running around the court and doing shuffles around the court is not the ideal way to get ready to compete. Instead, what would you have an athlete do?
So, you know what? We're going to do this. I'm really excited about this. I'm happy you brought it up. Anyone listening tonight, I'm going to send you a link to my 2023 warm-up, and you guys can look at it. Okay. And so I'm going to give you I'm just going to give you a quick overview. So we start the first exercise. We actually do some breathing, just breathing, getting centered, expanding the rib cage. Then we do some shoulder mobility. And then the exercises are very multidimensional from the standpoint that not one exercise is just doing one thing. We're looking at ankle mobility. We're looking at hip mobility. We're looking at thoracic mobility. We're looking at some core activation. We're looking at shoulder strengthening. We're looking at shoulder mobility and getting the body completely prepped. Then we go into this activation with elastics. So elastics around the ankles, elastics for the upper body. And one thing that I've really come to love is performing a lunge sequence. So imagine a forward lunge, a lateral lunge, a reverse lunge, and a curtsy. So you have 4 different ones while performing upper body elastic exercises.
Ooh. Yeah. Which challenges the balance too.
Challenges the balance, but also really activates the shoulder and actually strengthens the shoulder. And, I've done this warm up with kids that perhaps come to the club. They're not used to it. They find it difficult. Yeah. But the warm up itself already is a training tool. Imagine you're doing, 4-12, you're doing 24 lunges, let's say 25. You do that 5 days a week. It's 125 lunges in a week. In a month, I don't do math, but it's probably about 500. And so being really efficient, I think that's the number one step. We're not paying attention enough to the warm-up as we're putting it together. I'm sorry to say this, and I don't want to insult any coaches are not paying enough attention to the athletes when they're warming up. That's another thing. We're expecting the athletes to go on court and to perform and to start performing with the warm-up. And if they don't, we're like, hey, pay attention. Well, coaches, you got to be paying attention too. It's not time to be on your phones. It's not time to be talking about the lesson plan, and especially not time to be talking about what happened last night, during the ball game. But we have to be there for them. I would really highly suggest that the tennis coaches do the warm-up with the athletes. Tennis coaches, I love when I go and I do a mobility session at a conference and I get these tennis coaches on the ground, and all I hear is, oh, and I'm like, yeah, but guys, the guys and women, we have to be honest here. We use our bodies for our livelihood. And if we don't take care of it, you might be packing it in a little earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting the body ready to play it's got to be step one. You can't just start playing. You've got to do something to get the body prepped for that. And as you said, starting with the breathing, I love that. That's step one of your get ready to play, because that gets the mind ready as well as the body, right? So we've, had a lot of guests on this podcast talking about the mental side of tennis, but getting centered, focusing inward for 30 seconds to take those few deep breaths is so beneficial.
Yeah. we have 9 deep breaths, like big inhales, exhale from 3 different positions. And the other thing I want to tack on to that, talking about getting ready, the last thing I want is an athlete that I'm working with to be on a court and have their first quick movement be in a drill or in a competition.
Right.
That's why, all of the warm-ups end off with some very aggressive shuffling to sprints and movement and changes of direction. So as you said, and you're 100% right, the body is ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just say, I played league tennis and, getting older, my body's getting older. And the one thing that I have noticed that's giving me issues as every year it gets a little bit worse is that changing directions. So incorporating something in my preparation that gets my body firing and ready to go from right to left and zig and zag and all of that. Because where you start to feel it is the knees and the hips and the ankles, right? And yeah, once those little niggling injuries start, they just quickly can snowball, especially at my age, but even in a 10-year-old.
And you know what? I think age really, obviously younger, they have a better chance at being more supple and having better mobility. But kids are sitting in school all day long also. And, we've heard it said so many times that sitting is the new smoking. The hamstrings, people are showing up with really tight ankles a lot. And one thing I'd like to share is that what people might not realize is that the body is essentially a segment of joints stacked on top of one another. So, and they alternate between stable and mobile. So, if you look at your wrist, well, your wrist, you can bend side to side, you can do 360s, and you can go front and back. That means it's a mobile joint. If you look at your elbow, well, it can't do the same thing, or at least it shouldn't, and it's a stable joint.
Right.
But if we relate that to the lower body and we say, well, ankle mobility, why is that important? Well, because if you don't have good ankle mobility, what's going to happen to the knee? Because the body's smart. It's going to try to accomplish whatever it needs to accomplish. So a lack of mobility in one area is going to go ask another area to be more mobile that is not meant to be mobile. Right. So that's why outside of tennis, that's why we see so many lower back problems, because people's hips are just so tight. And then the lower back, the lumbar spine just takes a kicking.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And even starting with the feet, right? And this is something that, again, the older I get, the more I notice, I'm really having to pay attention to my feet and take care of my feet. But proper socks, proper shoes are super important for our young athletes, because we want their feet to be protected. We want them to have the necessary cushion to absorb, the constant beating. And that's your first contact, right? Is your foot on the ground. And if you look at the kinetic chain, it starts with your feet and it moves up the body. So, there are all these little bits and pieces that we kind of just say, oh, my kids' shoes are worn out, but, let's let them go a couple more weeks. Well, that could be the difference between an ankle injury or not.
Well, it's brilliant what you said, because, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I didn't mention about the warm-up is that we do our warm-up barefoot. We do it in socks. So, the athletes,
Wait, say why.
You said, what's that?
Why do you do it in socks instead of in shoes?
But you gave the answer to that already. What is the first thing that makes contact with the ground? It's your foot. You got to take good care of that, because if the body's not receiving the appropriate information from the ankle and the foot, it's like, stepping on a hose. It's not going to be fluid coming up. So information is sent up and then it's sent down. So if you have bad ankles, or, your feet aren't what they should be, it affects your squat, for example. But by doing the exercises barefoot, first of all, you're really helping strengthen the foot and you're getting a better stretch. Certain of the mobility exercises that we do really put a nice strain on the foot, on the big toe itself, in order to maintain that mobility. And, at the end of your workouts or at the beginning, I think foam rolling your feet. Oh my goodness, that is just heaven.
I
It
agree.
really is.
Yeah. And you can even use a tennis ball. You don't even have to have a foam roller.
Yeah, just make sure it's a really, a tennis ball is good if it's brand new. A lacrosse ball will go. I mean, they're like $20 on Amazon. It's not a big deal. It's worth the investment, because the lacrosse ball, as great as it is for your feet, can do so many other little things and get into smaller areas for your lat, your upper back, even the glutes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Love that. Love that. Oh, so with the injury prevention, we know sleep is a huge factor and that our kids are not getting enough sleep. Where does that come into play in the work that you're doing with the young players? Do you talk about that? Do you help them understand the importance of putting the cell phone away? And
oh, yeah, I mean, you're hitting it all on the head for me, because I just did a presentation this past week on recovery, and the number one thing for recovery is sleep. And the data is just overwhelming that if you don't get enough sleep, for our junior players, it has to be 8 hours. It should be 8 hours and above. I mean, if you get one bad night, but a consistent bad sleep will increase the risk of injury. Under 6 hours of sleep, risk of injury increases by 75%. The risk of sickness increases dramatically. And there's been a lot of research. I'm not gonna give numbers because I don't remember them off the top of my head, but serve accuracy increases with better sleep. And the result is the opposite is true too. A decrease in sleep will decrease reaction time. So, it's not just more is better, but less is worse. Anyways, I think I understand what I'm saying. I hope everyone else does. But going in that direction. And do I talk to them? Yeah, I absolutely do. And especially around exam time, the combination of sleep, lack of sleep, let's call it, and then the exam period itself. Obviously, they're staying up later to sleep, to study, not getting as much sleep. That combination of the stress and the sleep, that's a period of time that mid-November where we traditionally see injuries go up slightly because of such factors. So in that case, we just tell the kids, like, look, you have a big exam, don't come in. It's okay. Guys, it's okay to miss a day. Your game's not going to fall apart. I guarantee it. Take care of what you got to take care of. Come back when you're fresh again, like get a good night's sleep, be ready, not have that on your mind. It's just going to be more beneficial for your studies and to your game. Because one of the big reasons, Lisa, for injuries is when we're on court and we're tired and we lose focus, or our body is weak and we're trying to get out of that corner. We're talking about change of direction, but I'm a little tired. My foot isn't going where it should. And maybe I roll it, or maybe, my lower back feels it because I'm not maintaining a strong core.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's that whole thing too of just the mental focus that it is required to be successful on a tennis court. If you are not getting proper sleep, it's very difficult to maintain that focus, as you're saying. But even things like, there's an errant ball on the court and, you're just tired and you don't see it, or you just don't have the energy to go pick it up. And then that's when you end up stepping on it and rolling your ankle or worse. So yeah, the sleep piece is huge. And one thing I just recently heard is it's not just the quantity of sleep, but the quality of your sleep as well. And, my husband and I have this kind of running thing. Caffeine, he says, doesn't affect him. He can drink, a cup of coffee or a Diet Coke or whatever in the evening, and he's fine. If I have one after noon, it's bad. If I have one after 2 p.m., it's disastrous. Okay. And so, but what I just learned is you may think you're sleeping okay, but even having that caffeine late in the day it does impact the quality of sleep that you're getting, even if you stay asleep.
Yeah. The quality of sleep is really important. I mean, I am not a good sleeper. I'm just not. And I try and do so much to achieve that quality of sleep. For example, I'll put my cell phone away at least an hour before bed. I do breathing exercises prior to sleep, even stretching prior to sleep to really try and relax the body in order to get that quality. Because I, you know, I might sleep through the night, which is rare, but when I do, I could still wake up and go, yeah, but I remember so much. Like it wasn't a deep sleep. You're not getting that sleep that's really going to help you recover to the most of your abilities.
What are some of the other like missing pieces that you're noticing in the off-court training, especially for junior players? Because collegiate players, it's a whole other issue with them. They're balancing so many different demands. But let's focus on the juniors. Are we still seeing kids having flexibility issues? Are we still seeing kids developing injuries as children that were showing up only in adults 15 years ago? Or are we starting to get better with all of this?
That's a great question. I don't know if we're getting worse or if we're getting better. The injuries in junior players are a little different than the adult players. Junior players, sometimes, I guess adult players too, but due to a technique that isn't sound, will definitely can affect the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder. Coaches trying to teach serves that are more suited for adult players, you can see affecting the lower back. Kids in terms of growth spurts, having pains, especially knee pains. We have to be really smart with that. It's not a question of just, it's just growth pains, just play through it. It's important that we reduce the load by close to 30% and try and take care of it as much as possible, not putting the same load in terms of, okay, well, it's a plyometric day. Perhaps we're doing jumps. Perhaps you don't do jumps today. We'll find something else for you to do. And being smart. I think it's just using common sense. You hear, the problem with common sense is that isn't very common these days, but it's really being sensible. And, I talk with all the kids. Like if I know someone has something going on, I'm like, how's it feeling today? Okay. What it is on 1 on 10. Okay. Well, maybe, okay. Doesn't mean you have to take the whole day up, but maybe you only play an hour instead of 2 hours, and let's tackle this. And I think by doing that we can have better results with our junior players. Now, if I can add, I think the gym aspect of it is really important, especially if we're, talking between a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old is really two different animals.
Yeah.
But for the kids that have gone through, peak height velocity and are maturing as men and women, the way we train them, I think is truly important. We don't want to be training tennis players like bodybuilders. And I think that is one of the big things, as you mentioned at the beginning, that if you are going into your local gym, you're going to get a personal trainer that is traditionally, and no fault to them, but traditionally they're used to helping men and women lose weight. Number one is always losing weight. I want to get ready for summer. I want to tone up. I want, bigger biceps or whatever it is. So that's not the program that we're looking for. We're looking at a program that is going to be designed, set a base, just teaching proper technique, please. I can't tell you, we had this new boy come to our club from another club, and I watched him the first couple of days, and I was like, so first time in a sports study program? No. I was at one for a whole year last year. I'm like, oh, okay. Anything? Oh no, I had private. Like, it was shocking. And I mean this, I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm being fully sincere here. It was shocking at how bad everything he did physically.
Hmm.
Like, I can't
The
believe what they
form.
did. The form of
Yeah.
everything, his running, his movement, the gym was just like, wow. Like, guys, coaches, we have to correct. You have to be vigilant. You have to be on top of things. You know, I'm known, oh, he's so picky. Yes, I am extremely picky and I'm a pain in the ass. I admit it. It's fine. I will wear that badge with pride. But I always find that the athletes I am working with are reflection of what I'm teaching.
For sure. For sure. We were talking about sleep, and you mentioned about recovery. I want to know what the current mode of thinking is about using heat and ice after exercise or training or playing. Are ice baths still a thing? What are the recommendations now to help these athletes recover, especially if they're in a tournament where they're playing multiple matches in a day?
Right. Yeah. So number one that I would say is, we said sleep was the most important. So then on that list, before we get to the hot and cold ice baths or saunas or whatever it is, hydration and nutrition.
Sure.
You know, I just want people to realize that, because I think, Lisa, people sometimes are looking for that magic egg or that magic bullet, like, oh, I'm going to do that, I'm going to recover so well. But if you don't have your sleep down pat, if you don't have your nutrition, your hydration, and your programming, it's not there, then any other massage gun or foam roll doesn't matter. It just doesn't, like, it kind of doesn't matter. It matters, but it matters less. Yeah. So the big thing with ice, with ice baths right now is that if you're in tournament, yes, I think it's a great thing to do. It's good to reduce inflammation of the body. The thing that players have to remember is that you have to choose either ice or hot for what is the effect that you want. So if you're in the middle of a season and I'm looking to get gains in terms of strength or hypertrophy, then I don't want to do an ice bath, because that will negate the effects, where heat might be better. Now, if you're
let's back up 1 second though, Dean.
Yeah.
So just to kind of explain that a little further, heat brings blood to the area that you're heating. Cold causes blood flow to go away from the area, reduces the inflammation in the area. So keeping that in mind is what you're saying. What effect are we trying to achieve here? Or do we want to bulk up, or do we want to reduce inflammation? Right? Is that kind of where we're going?
No, it's very well said. And that's why during a tournament, doing an ice bath is beneficial, because we're trying to get ready for the next day.
Right.
And then you can combine both of them, from hot and cold, and mixing that up a couple of minutes each, going back and forth, which really has also a positive effect. The literature, it really is changing quite a bit. On a yearly base, or more so. Again, I think for the athlete, if they feel it is having a positive effect for them, then I say do it. Like, if you feel you're better afterwards, go ahead. If you think, oh, I just want to get in a sauna and relax and everything, be careful how long you're staying in there, because you're probably we don't want to dehydrate the body more. And then again, it's something, as I said on this recovery presentation I did, it's not that available for everybody, because standing under a shower under cold water is not going to give you the effect. You really have to have that water pretty cold and be, up to your neck in it.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a hotel room with a bathtub, awesome.
Go find that ice bucket. Oh, I don't know about you. I can't. I mean, I say I can. If I guess I really had to, I would. Yes, I live in Montreal and I hate the cold. So there, I've just
it's kind of miserable. It's kind of miserable.
Yeah.
Any other advice that you would give to the junior players who are trying to build their strength, build their endurance, improve their flexibility, reduce their risk of injury, in addition to all the wonderful things that you've already shared. Have I missed anything with you?
I want to add one thing in there because we're talking about building. The other important part of recovery is right after you finish training or after practice session or after a match, recovery starts at that moment. And what does that mean? We have to start taking energy in. So whether it's chocolate milk or a smoothie or something, it has to start within the first 30 minutes. And I think that's what made me think of it is when you said junior players. The junior players often after practice, okay, they'll stretch and they'll leave, but they won't have anything until they get home. And, that could be just because they're home doesn't mean they're sitting down at the dinner table right away. So it could be an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours after practice before they start taking a nutrient. We're doing recovery work to prepare ourselves to have a great day the next day, and to allow our body not just to recover, but to adapt, right? So we can have this higher baseline of fitness every time, so we can become stronger, faster, better endurance. Going to your initial question, I think for me, and people are probably going to, oh, he's a fitness guy. Of course he's saying this. You can take some time away from your fitness, from your tennis, and put more time into fitness is becoming more and more important. And I'm hearing this from high level coaches. I'm not like, this is at the highest level. They're focusing probably a little bit more now on fitness than they ever have. I mean, a junior player doesn't arguably, but I've seen stats that show junior players play more tennis than professional players.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're at the age of 13 and you're playing 18 hours of tennis a week or 14 or 15, walk that back a little. Let's get more fitness in there. Let's get you more fit, because I think sometimes not the pressures, but the professional style game is being implemented on our junior players when they don't have the body to respond to it or to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So why are we getting injuries? Because we're asking too much of a body that's not prepared for it. Missing 1 or 2 tournaments that aren't that important, preparing for the tournaments that are important and developing and building, it's going to take you much further in the long run. Stop looking at, tomorrow and start planning a more efficient and productive future.
Yeah, love that. And I want to just kind of throw out an idea talking about the post-practice or post-match energy intake. So eating, when you're packing up your cooler to go to practice or go to a tournament match, throw something in there that you can eat as you're walking off the court. It's so easy, right? Just to, throw a bag of almonds or, just a smoothie or something that's in your cooler that's going to give you those immediate calories to help you recover. The chocolate milk in the little boxes was always our go-to, and that was super easy just to keep. And, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Nobody's telling you that you have to, get these complicated things in your kid. It's calories. We want healthy calories going in them so that their bodies can rebuild and get ready for the next stress, whatever that is.
Yes, please. Healthy calories. Healthy calories, not a burger and fries. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that from time to time. I don't want to be that person, but also, what came to mind, Lisa, is that at the beginning of the year, I had so many kids that, an hour to an hour and a half within practice, I'd be like, okay, guys, okay, now's time to start taking in some nutrition, some calories to provide you with energy. And I'd have a good 30% of them have nothing left. And I'm like, I ate it all during lunch. Well, lunch was already 3 hours ago, and you played an hour of tennis or an hour and a half of tennis. Of course, your energy level is going to drop, which will drop your performance level.
Yeah, Yeah. And it's easy. Keeping bags of
Mhm.
almonds, dates are great, blueberries are great. I
Yeah.
mean,
There's
and
so
I will
much.
say, I've said this a million times, a tournament's not the time to try something new, food wise or drink
Yeah.
wise, right? Please, please, please test these things out in practice for at least a week prior to a tournament, because the last thing you want is your kid to get an upset stomach on the tournament court. That's miserable for everybody.
That is so well said. Yeah, we don't want to try a new type of protein drink or whatever it is
Yeah.
the day of. Or listen, I tell the athletes I work with, keep a small diary. Okay. And when you have a tournament where you felt great, go look at what you ate that day and let's replicate that. And please pay attention. Like, was it a morning, an afternoon, a late evening match? Because that really starts playing into it. When you have to start playing early in the morning, that breakfast has to be solid. We know we should be eating a full meal at least 3 hours prior to competition with some snacks along the way. But it's not an easy venture to juggle, performing at a high level with insufficient energy.
For sure. For sure. All right, Dean. How do people get in touch with you? I'm going to have all your social media links in the show notes, for sure, because if you're not following him on Instagram, please follow him on Instagram. He puts amazing, amazing content out.
Thank you.
But how else can people get a hold of you?
So on Instagram, I'll just say it. It's _ at baseline power _ I'm on Facebook at Dean Hollingworth. You can also find me at www.baselinepower.com, where I have a video series that covers all aspects of training for tennis players. And within there, you can just click a link. If you have questions, you can send me an email. I will say I am pretty good at getting back with my emails within a couple of days. So that would be the easiest way.
Awesome. Awesome. Always a pleasure talking to you. I always learn new stuff. And I love that, you are constantly learning and then so willing to share your new knowledge with all the rest of us. So thank you for all the time that you spend staying up to date on the latest research, participating in the research, trying things out with your clients, and then helping the rest of us get better. So I super, super appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on, and right back at you, Lisa. I have a podcast too, the Tennis Fitness Podcast, and I know it's time consuming, and I can see that you love doing it and you're a joy to talk with, and thank you for everything you do.
Oh, sweet. Thank you very much. And I'll have the link to your podcast in the show notes as well. So everybody make sure you subscribe to that. Thanks again for coming on, Dean. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time on Parenting Aces.